a fairly long time. I've seen the
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Order placed to buy Swiss franc at 0.91109. I'm placing an order to buy Swiss franc at 0.91109.
Quite a long time, yeah.
And you know, I want to pick up on that final point that you just gave, because it really does reflect everything that we've heard from almost leaders across Europe, the Commission too, to really get this message across that the vaccine is not a silver bullet, that we all need to be flexible and adapt. So I wonder, how do we do that on a daily basis to keep the economy afloat? I do wonder, do you have a plan in terms of what the next 6 months are going to look like for the Belgium economy?
Well, look, the way we managed the second wave is different than we did it in the first wave. In the first wave, we went for an almost full lockdown. We closed down all non-essential businesses. This time, it's different. And the non-essential retail is closed, but all the other businesses are open. People have adapted themselves in working from home as much as they can. We now have face masks. I mean, a lot of life is still going on. It's just we've been better at identifying at what is risky behavior and trying to minimize.
Long position opened at Swiss franc 0.91109.
European Business Summit in Brussels. Now, the focus on the markets is actually on some of the positive news out there. The fact that Joe Biden's advisors have said that they will not look at a lockdown. Again, so many questions about whether we need to put the economy against the health of people. But this is the way it goes, and certainly that's what the markets are looking at. The number of infected keep on rising, but there's hope that a vaccine will be here sooner than expected. We'll also look at some of the scarring for the economies around the world. Bloomberg surveillance continues in the next hour. Tom Keene joins me out of New York, and this is Bloomberg. Another day of risk off across the financial markets. We bring you special coverage of all the price action and implications here on Bloomberg Television. Balancing risks, President-elect Biden's team suggests a national lockdown is not on the agenda. Virus cases in the U.S. surpassed 11 million, but global stocks continue to gain. Trump's last stand, the president comes close to admitting he lost, but walks back all the talk of a concession on Twitter. There are reports he plans fresh hardline moves against Beijing in the final weeks of his term. And best laid plans, Brexit talks with the EU enter another crucial week, but the UK Prime Minister is isolating after coming into contact with a lawmaker who tested positive for coronavirus. Well, good morning, everyone. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. I'm Francine Lacqua here in London, Tom Keane in New York. Of course, if you're watching from Asia, good afternoon to you. This is Monday morning, Tom, and there's a lot going on. First of all, we look at this historic trade agreement with a lot of the Asian countries that was signed yesterday. It may put extra pressure on the next president of the United States to rejoin TPP, but the focus is, of course, on the president, Trump, whether he'll concede and what this means for trade deals with China as well.
Yeah, I read about the trade deal. I mean, it's on the back of the burner for Americans because both candidates, both parties are really reticent to sign those deals. We can touch on that, but you're right. Front and center here in the nation is the step-by-step, the back and forth, the tweet-by-tweet with the president. But even fronter than that is the pandemic. Francine, it was the oddest of weekends.
Yeah, it was actually a really busy weekend, and here, of course, in the UK with news that Boris Johnson, who contracted the virus, remember, in March, who even went to ICU, now having to self-isolate after coming into contact with someone who's tested positive. So we'll have plenty more on that and the consequences for Brexit. But first, let's get straight to the Bloomberg First Word News. Here's Ritika Gupta. Hi, Ritika.
Morning, Francine, Tom. President-elect Joe Biden's top coronavirus advisors say a national lockdown isn't on the agenda. One of them, former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, says the preferred approach to fighting it is, quote, a dial that we turn up and down depending on severity. U.S. case records have hit records over the past 2 weeks. Boris Johnson's attempt to get his premiership back on track has stumbled before it even began. The British Prime Minister is being forced to self-isolate after meeting a lawmaker who tested positive for the coronavirus. Johnson had hoped to regain control of the national agenda following a chaotic turf war in Downing Street. In sports, Dustin Johnson made history while winning his first Masters tournament. The world's top-ranked golfer shot a record 20 under par to win by 5 shots. It was the largest margin of victory at the Masters in 23 years. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ritika Gupta. This is Bloomberg. Francine, Tom.
Ritika, thanks so much. What we've got going right now is equities higher. We can talk a lot about this. We'll do this through all of surveillance today. Futures up 31. Dow futures explode up 295, buttressed right up against 29,705. The VIX shows at 23.52. You wonder as the VIX opens if we'll get a 22 handle on the VIX this morning. Dollar, little bit of weakness, but I'd really focus, Francine, is on Pacific Rim. It's not a series we look at often.
Placing a stop on profit for Swiss franc at 1.91 509. Okay, 9. We'll move lower to 4.9. Maybe it will go maybe higher. So as you can see, this is resistance level. So if it will get lower, I will be in a profit. If it will go higher, I will still hold stop at the level 0.91149.
He said, I concede nothing. Ron Klain, President-elect Biden's chief of staff, told NBC's Meet the Press that a concession from Trump was immaterial.
Donald Trump's Twitter feed doesn't make Joe Biden president or not president. The American people did that. What we really want to see this week, Chuck, is the General Services Administration issue that ascertainment so we can start to do the kinds of things you and I talked about a few minutes ago. Meet with these vaccine officials, kind of get the intelligence briefings for the president-elect, the vice president-elect.
Well, joining us now is Lindsay Newman, independent senior political analyst and former Chatham House senior research fellow of U.S. and the Americas. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, frankly, it's just bizarre. Like, it's difficult to know who's right, the whole thing just, it's like a bad plot out of a B-rated movie. How does this end, and what happens this week?
Well, as you said, it's to begin with, all eyes remain on Trump. Absolutely. Will he concede? When will he concede? And also how he will concede. I appreciate that Ron Klain, incoming chief of staff's statement on Meet the Press. And it's important really to separate out the question of who will be president on January 20th, 2021. Barring some unforeseen events, that will be Joe Biden. He is 306 electoral college votes to Trump's 232. But separate that question of who will be president next year with the question of how is the current president behaving during this important period. If it were any other country in the world, we would be concerned about the political system, the health of that political system, and its trajectory.
Lindsay, give me a sense of exactly what you think Joe Biden needs to do now. Is he getting the very important briefings that usually the president-elect has access in a transition period?
So Donald Trump continues, as you said, to use this language around a rigged election. He is not conceding. There was this moment where on Twitter where he said that Biden won because of the election being fraudulent. But now, as you said, he's backtracked. So where Biden stands is still pretty much shut out. He is taking important steps. He has named his transition team across various sectors. He's named Ron Klain to be his chief of staff. He's named this COVID advisory board. So he is putting his ducks in a row. He's calling foreign advisors and having that dialogue open, which he did not have during the campaign. He was very clear about not having a foreign dialogue during the campaign process. So Biden is doing everything he can at this stage to conduct a transition. But the transition is not happening because from the Trump side, it is not being received. The GSA has not authorized. Biden is not getting the daily intelligence briefings. And we're seeing that even Trump's former advisors like former Chief of Staff John Kelly, former National Security Advisor Bolton, are concerned. They're saying this is now rises to a national security issue. There's potential concerns about intelligence, but also around coronavirus. They're not able to get that information as they do their planning and as they get ready for January 20th, 2021.
Lindsay, the clock ticks forward, and I understand that this week is different than last week, and we're into a holiday season. I mean, November, we get Thanksgiving next week in America, and then we go into December with the third, fourth week with Christmas as well. Lindsay, what I find extraordinary here is where is the judiciary? In your study of this, is this an executive/legislative issue, or does the judiciary participate in this original history?
So what's important to point out here is Trump has thus far been using the court system, has been bringing these lawsuits, which by and large thus far have been tossed out. The key point here, and when we talked about last time I was on, was related to Bush v. Gore. We remain not in Bush v. Gore territory. And the point is, with Bush v. Gore, that related to a recount where the margin in Florida was 537 votes. So the court's decision in that case could have been decisive. It could have been a game changer. Everything we've seen thus far in terms of evidence, of which there is very little concrete evidence.
But Lindsay, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think this is important. Does the judiciary play a voice or part in the transition issue? Do they get involved? We don't know, do we?
So the process is very much ticking forward. Right now at the state level, the states are certifying these votes. And then there's the opportunity for Trump to bring objections, in which case the sort of judicial levels at the state levels could be brought in. It could take its way up to the Supreme Court, but nothing that we've seen so far suggests that a judicial decision would be decisive, would be a game changer in this instance. So we have, in December, the electoral slate will be selected on December 8th. On December 14th, the electoral voters will vote. We have this idea of the faithless elector. But really, this is Biden has 306 electoral college votes and more than 5.6 million in the popular vote. So this is not a close election in that sense that the judiciary is going to be able to intervene and have a decisive decision one way or the other.
Position closed on Swissy at 0.91, 149.
Seen is there has been some sort of space being given by some Republicans, but by and large, most Republicans are staying quiet. And then there are those that are continuing to actively rally and support President Trump. The election itself was a mixed message because what we saw was that down ballot, Republicans did very well. But with the question of Trump himself, many people decided to go for Biden and then go down ballot Republican. So the question is, where does the Republican Party go from here? What does this mean for so-called Trumpism? If Trump was not, there wasn't a mandate for Trump, but there was a mandate perhaps, or certainly a positive swing for the Republican Party. It's going to be very difficult for them to figure out what the next steps are with Trump no longer in that all-important office. Although I, for one, do not think he's going away. I fully expect him to continue to throw out these ideas around a media